What's going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the 2014 EP by New Year's Day. I've covered them recently, but I want to cover them again because there's some good stuff here. Basically, this project came out in the fall of 2014, and it's called Epidemic. Now, basically, I knew about some of their earlier stuff somewhat, or at least was wanting to look into it because they were kind of similar to Blood on the Dance Floor and Jeffree Star and stuff. But apparently, Jackal Goldking knew about them also, and he had shown me a song from this album back in the summer of 2021. And I kind of forgot about it. I was just looking around and I saw that, and I kind of was like, hey, I might show that clip of what I thought of the song. The song that he showed me was The Joker, and I might show that, what I thought of that 2 years ago at some point. But I just kind of feel like I wanted to check out the rest of this project to kind of see what it's about because I already like New Year's Day and I kind of encountered them 2 years before I encountered them just a month ago. So I wanted to see what I thought of more of their music. And this is actually a pretty rock solid release. I would have to say it has a certain allure about it. And I kind of feel like Ash Costello and her band New Year's Day is kind of like a more recent and kind of more 2010s induced version of like Evanescence. They have similarities. I feel like the riffs that I get from New Year's Day are a little bit more edgy. They don't quite have the ghoulish kind of like haunting pianos and kind of ghostly veneer of Evanescence, but they do have like the metal side of it down. Like Evanescence can do metal too, but I feel like this is kind of more where the light kind of alternative metal kind of gothicness is not quite as heavy, but it's just kind of like a gothic metal kind of band more so than like alternative metal like Evanescence kind of is. But it is similarity. I would definitely, if you were looking for more stuff like Evanescence, I would probably recommend this band to you if you wanted a female vocalist and that type of stuff. But there were three singles from this project. The first single was The Other Side. This really has like a haunting and kind of leery production in the first verse, but the second verse has like a nice mosh pit kind of part, which is something I'm not so sure how often Evanescence kind of does that, but it is, at least I think they probably have. But this is a nice variation because it could have just been the two leery verses, but the first verse is kind of more leery and kind of haunting, but the second part kind of has more metal induced type stuff in the verse. And then this is an overall kind of riveting and kind of ghoulish commercial kind of tune. I feel like this is definitely something. I mean, I do still feel like even in 2014, New Year's Day was still kind of underground, despite that they had been around for 7 or 8 years. But I kind of look after it, this is at least having aims for commercial. This is probably like low key, like rhythmic or rock rhythmic kind of radio type stuff that you might have heard if you're just looking for underground type stuff, because I definitely have always felt like New Year's Day was just kind of a band that was kind of on the cusp of becoming like commercial, but I just it may just be the chorus or something, but they're just kind of like a hair or two underneath like breaking even. Like there's been bands like Motionless in White and stuff like that, those kind of bands throughout the 2010s, even like Davey Suicide and some of those bands that kind of break even, but they don't quite have a single that quite reaches the riveting tone enough to really crack commercial radio. But there's just so much in rock music. I definitely feel like they have a nice niche for themselves with trying to do it, just because there wasn't an overabundance of gothic metal apart from Marilyn Manson and Korn and Evanescence and some of them. But this is definitely kind of decent underground commercial, just a hair or two beneath what could have broke even. And the second single was Epidemic, the title track. And this is one that's just kind of an overcast kind of tune. This is like the typical tune that you hear in like the second or third single of a rock album that's not really like a club highlight or like a radio highlight, but just kind of one that's more about busy days and kind of errand running and just getting tasks done and responsibilities and that type of stuff. This is the more makeshift tune, and it's kind of interesting for an alternative and kind of, Vans Warped tour kind of artists like New Year's Day to kind of do a tune like this. This is actually something that tries to be alternative, makeshift, and that type of stuff, but it does have like a haunting tune about it. And like that, just the overcast day, kind of cloudy day, just kind of bleary, kind of makeshift kind of tune that's in typical post grunge and some of that type of stuff, but it just kind of has a haunting feel towards it on top of that. So that's a nice one. And then Defame Me was the third single, and this is the most commercial of these. This is a real freakish kind of highlight here. Yeah, this is just a real freakish highlight kind of here. It's very commercial. this kind of alternative makeshift, and it just has like a rousing kind of rock oriented thing in the verses. It's not so much alternative metal as much as it is just like gothic metal. This kind of has like a very pacey kind of feel towards it, but it's just really crafted for radio, and just has that kind of tight compactness. This is probably the closest thing I think, at least from what I've seen thus far, of New Year's Day being able to break even. I really feel like they were just like a stone's throw or just like a hop, skip, and a jump away from cracking into commercial radio with this sort of stuff. It just was really good. It's relatively happened to be a thing. The chorus is pretty damn excellent. This is definitely an example of rock that this really has. But that's just the thing about it. There's just so much in rock radio, and if they can really only hold about 30 or 40 songs at a time, I'd probably say this had to have been like 55, 60, somewhere in there. Just really close, but just didn't quite. I mean, I admit that the chorus, I definitely like the background vocals that helped the chorus, but it was not quite as overtly addictive as like something like Kryptonite by like Three Doors Down, or like Cowboy by Kid Rock or something like that, or Enter Sandman by Metallica, one of those. But it is a pretty rock solid one. It's definitely for underground. This is, if you want underground but you also want commercial, this is a pretty good valve to try out, and that's definitely kind of the thing. There were 5 songs on this EP, and the thing about it is, I talked about the 3 songs. I recommend all 3 of the singles, and then the 4th song I recommend would be The Joker, the song that Jackal Goldkick showed me back in 2021. And this one's a really kind of gloomy night cut. I feel like this is more evening induced. This one's not quite as makeshift, but it just has like a real kind of rousing but gloomy kind of feel towards it. It's just a nice kind of stars in the sky kind of night cut. Just maybe you're smoking a swisher behind your house or something like that, just appreciating the night surroundings and that sort of stuff. It's a social gem. I can see it as like a backyard party and just a house party kind of highlight, that just kind of a house party cut that just has a lot of night energy and just social kind of feels towards it. I do like the kind of rousy and kind of sultry kind of energy that Ash Costello kind of has on this song. So it's a nice one. It's an overall well-crafted one, similar to stuff that Paramore and Evanescence kind of do. So that's kind of the concept, but I didn't really like the 5th song on here. The only song I didn't enjoy that much was just Let Me Down. And really the arrangements of this song was just the makeup, the genetic makeup of this song was just not quite as hit induced as I would have liked for it to have been. There's just like a lot of angles that just didn't quite mesh as well. Like the instrumentation doesn't really repeat things as much, and this was kind of messier than what I was trying to have for like a track like that. And this is kind of where it just was not as organized as probably I would have liked for it. It just, and especially the arrangements in the verses just didn't quite come off as that compelling. So that was like the only song out of the 5 that I didn't enjoy. But this is really like a quite decent shot in the arm as far as like compelling kind of gothic metal that is like almost commercial. It's definitely, they still are alternative, and they hadn't quite crossed over into the realm of like true commercial like Evanescence and Paramore and some of those more rousing ones, but they were definitely like a good alternative that's just kind of on the low key sense that kind of did that. So I'm going to give this EP like a 9 out of 10. I connected with this a lot. There were some gems on here, and for the most part the singles hit, or at least they did damage. Like, I don't know the degree, like I have just started listening to this project, so I'd have to let this project grow on me some. I'd have to really see about it to see the true addictiveness of it. But from what I've seen, it's a pretty, it's pretty stellar, staunch kind of highlight as far as that kind of goes. So it's doing things in the right direction. And then the Joker song that Jackal Goldkick showed me, I continue to like it even 2 years later. So that just kind of happens to be a thing. I don't know if this album came out on CD. I'd like for it to. If it didn't, that would be another reason why this would get notched a little bit in the score, because it needs to. I definitely think this needs to be like a quick 5-song CD or something, but I give it a 9 out of 10. The social score I'm going to give an 8, because I do like the aspect of this project, but I kind of feel like it was making sharp attempts to kind of cross over into commercial and that type of stuff, but considering that they didn't chart on this album, it's just kind of more left field, and it's just more the aspect of how well it's going to connect and that type of stuff. It's just kind of, it's more of like a choice, kind of being selective as to whether or not the crowd that you roll with is going to truly like be enamored with it to that degree. And I think that's just kind of the concept. It is kind of underground, and it's kind of an acquired taste. It's not an acquired taste like it takes like a chore to sit there and listen to, but I do feel like some folks might be like, well, let's just listen to Evanescence or Paramore instead. But it is a nice alternative highlight, and New Year's Day improved, and they just continue to be underground alternative highlights. So this is really the thing. In terms of the future, like apparently New Year's Day is working on a new album. They've put out projects at least up to like 2019 or 2020 or something. They have a number of projects. I'm going to get to more of these, but we'll see what happens. They've at least dropped a single, and they're charting nowadays. That's kind of the thing about it, but we'll see what happens.